Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Stephanie, and I'm here with my colleague Abby. I hope you can all hear us well. If you've got any technical issues, please put it on the chat. And yes, if you have any questions as well, please put them on the chat, and we will come back to you at the end. So today we're going to speak about organizational skills and becoming more independent. Just to mention as well that we're on a setting today, we're on a school. So if you hear background noises, we apologize in advance. Let's jump to our topic, organizational skills and becoming more independent, which refers to those two interlinked topics. And we're going to go more into that now.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Abby. I'm going to take you through the contents of what you can expect for us to cover today. So we've got organisational skills and their importance for independence, internal factors to consider when developing organisational and independent skills. We're going to take you through a glance or at a glance from ages 0 to post-19 or plus 19. And how we can support, so how as OTs or professionals, adults, we can support independence in the educational setting and at home or in the community. We've put together some top tips that we're going to share with you, and if we have time at the end for some questions.
So let's start by defining organizational skills and what we mean by saying that. Organizational skills refer to a child's ability to organize themselves in different daily and learning activities. So this refers to time management, planning, decision-making, communication, prioritizing, and physical organization, just to name a few. The list goes on. So we know that autistic people find challenges on organizing and planning their day and completing tasks independently. So yes.
Okay, so next slide is internal organization. So so these can be things like the environment, the support systems that we have in place, and maybe the physical space that we're in. But we wanted to draw your attention to the more internal organizational factors that sometimes get forgotten or aren't often considered. And these are really quite unique to the individual. So these might be things like how the young person, do they have the necessary processing skills to initiate the task? Can they attend to the task that they're doing? Can they heed the instructions of the task? Can they sustain their performance when they're carrying out an activity, etc. Also, another thing that I put on the slide is sensory integration, and that refers to an individual's ability to effectively process, receive, organize, and correctly interpret the sensory input that they're receiving from the environment, and that will affect, autistic children differently. So that's something also to consider. Also, the essential components for organisation are motor planning, body awareness, timing, and memory. So these are all things that we will need to consider and will be unique to each person. Also, the physical limitations, so the body structures of the young person and their functions, how they function within that space. And again, I've said processing skills such as temporal organisation. So are they able to gather everything that they need together to complete the task or the activity? Can they arrange the tools that they need within that workspace, and can they sustain their performance within that, or can they make corrections and adapt their performance if something's not going quite right within the task.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move on to why are organizational skills important. We know that organizational skills and independence are considered as soft skills, although they're equally as important as a hard skill, which makes them quite difficult to quantify sometimes. And what makes them really important and valuable is the fact that they're transferable skills and they can be developed and used throughout the years. Just to name a few difficulties that a child with organizational skills might face is difficulty to organize their self and their belongings, following instructions, even if that's verbal or visual instructions, preparing for the school day, gathering the items needed to attend the school, identify the right tools for a job or a task, moving on to older ages, organizing their speech pace, if that's slow or fast, to slow down or speak faster, and structure a sentence using a subject, verb, and object structure, performing practical tasks such as dressing and feeding, and learning new novel skills that require more unrehearsed actions to be practiced.
Okay, so this is our first slide where we're looking at a glance through the ages. So this is from ages 0 to 10, and we're looking at the early years and primary school. And we're thinking about what independence and organizational skills looks like within this area. So we've tried to categorize all of our at a glance sections into categories of communication, sensory needs, and then executive functioning, processing skills. So we've said here in the first part of the slide that successful organization is achieved when a child can simultaneously arrange their bodies and their environment. So for an example there, we put sitting correctly at a chair or a desk and arranging their books and pens in front of them on the table. So that's an example of what that might look like. So communication at this stage is, it might be following a now, next, and then visual timetable. The sensory needs in this area might be arranging a sensory circuit so that we might prepare our young person for that particular task by offering alerting, organising or calming activities depending on what's needed at the time to support their engagement. Executive function and processing skills for this age might look like gathering items necessary for the activity, tidying up at the end of the activity, locating their belongings, and completing puzzles or playing games such as Lego. And as you'll see through the ages, using these categories of communication, sensory needs, and executive functioning, we're adding, or often we'll find that our young people are adding, more complex layers in each of those categories. So yeah.
Perfect. Now moving on to the older ages of primary, secondary school, and college, between 10 and 19. Independence and organizational skills can look like following a 6-step visual timetable at this age. So building up the complexity, as my colleague Abby said. Building their social skills in order to participate in more appropriate social interactions. And then moving on to sensory, practicing appropriate motor planning and dynamic risk assessment of the environment, such as accessing the community and travel training. So going out in the community, planning a trip to the shop, for example, and using a payment tool to get a desired item from the shop. And then executive functioning, some examples is following a sequence to complete activities of daily living, like preparing a snack or a simple meal, gathering the items necessary and the ingredients, using payment tools, as I said, like Oyster cards, and even more complex problem-solving games and puzzles that develop their processing skills. At this age, it's worth mentioning that puberty comes in, which can affect internal organization and sensations, which, is important to work on from an early stage.
Okay, so this is our final at a glance. So we're looking at post-19 into adulthood. And again, thinking about those categories that we talked about earlier. So communication at this stage typically might look like planning their day, choosing activities. We're now thinking more into time management. So A young person might then have a timetable that they're using images, so they might be plotting what they're doing at different timestamps throughout the day. So they might plan an activity at 9:30, then a snack, and then another activity before lunch. So they're actively participating in planning and structuring their day. Their social life is becoming a little bit more full, having fulfilling relationships with peers, family members, and maybe members of the community. Sensory needs perhaps can be more complex. They want to have more, they may have changing needs again from the onset of puberty. Their interests might have changed, so it's also been worth it to note that we need to kind of support that as well. Existing functioning and processing skills at this age also is thinking about gathering necessary items, perhaps for different activities like a leisure activity, maybe more based in the community. Managing finances, as my colleague Steph had said, completing domestic tasks such as unloading and loading a dishwasher, sweeping floors, again meal prep might be another one in this age group. Independent travel for work and for school, and then thinking about adulthood, so moving maybe into supported living, managing a tenancy, and making choices and choices around their future aspirations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on to some more examples on how we support develop independence in the education first. We all know that the school environment is where children learn and they develop their skills needed for independence. So I just want to highlight here that error is learning, and generating errors followed by constructive corrective feedback can be really beneficial for the children's learning. So one of the techniques that we use in the education setting is scaffolding, which refers to breaking tasks down and providing just the right amount of support to the children in order to encourage independence. Another one is a chaining method. So it's an instructional method, this one, common instructional method, where we've got forward and backward chaining, and the adult basically fades out their prompts to allow the student to complete most of the most of the steps to complete a task. So there's an example on the right hand in our slide, which gives more of an idea what that looks like for hand washing. We also use visual supports to support the child understand the concept better and follow a sequence for a task. Fade out prompts, as I said, and creating opportunities to practice skills of independence. So, for example, when a child finish their meal, it would be a great opportunity for them to tidy up and put their cutlery and plate on the sink and practice that skill of independence instead of us jumping in to help straight away. I know it's tempting sometimes.
Okay, I'm going to talk through what independence can look like at home. And I know that sometimes this can be an area that families struggle with. And I think, from both Steph and I's experience, lots of parents have told us that they do struggle with this. And the main issue is that sometimes the skills aren't easily transferred from home from school setting into the home setting. So maybe some opportunities some of the opportunities that we could think of at home could include really utilizing evenings and weekends when there's more time to focus on skill development. I know that this can be very difficult because home life can be quite stressful at times. But actually, if we're carving out evenings and weekend times where there's less pressure there's less demands on our time, we're not doing the school run, we're perhaps not rushing into work, etc. Rushing around with other kids, that kind of thing. It might be a good opportunity for our young people and young adults to practice those independent and organizational skills when there's less demands on the time, and an environment that's safe and welcoming for them. I would also maybe encourage to communicate with the school setting. So, thinking about what resources they are using, what techniques they're using to support independence, and try to mirror that as much as possible in the home setting can be really useful. Again, helping with that transferable skills, but also maintaining the consistency of the method that's been taught at school. And also then having expectations and modelling really matters is key to having those skills being transferred. So my colleague Steph gave the example earlier that there might be an expectation in school that once you've finished your snack or a meal, that you put your cutlery together and you take the plate and you put it in the sink or the dishwasher. Depending on the setup at home, those could be similar expectations that you might have at home, that once you finish a particular task, that you pack away as much as you're able to, and setting that example and modeling that within the home is also really important.
Mm-hmm. So how can we support? And by say we, I mean as occupational therapists, but in general, the interdisciplinary team. So one of the areas we can support is breaking the tasks down into smaller and more manageable chunks. Be mindful of that, using simple instructions when you're doing so. Physical and mental preparation for tasks. So it might be that we engage the child to a more mindful activity, an activity that supports their well-being before completing a challenging task, to prepare them mentally as well. Aids to memory and visual cues, using pictures, using visuals to help them structure an activity and give them some prompts and reminders can be useful. Timing and pacing, that refers to speech as well. So prompting them to slow down and use appropriate time management, like timers, to help them structure their day. As well as working with parents and schools to ensure that the right approaches to developing organizational skills continue even when the OTs are not present. We all obviously can't be there 24/7 to support develop independence for students. That's why we collaborate with parents to provide some resources, some strategies at home, some supportive equipment to develop independence, and encourage that at home too. We do so through an interdisciplinary approach. So in our settings, we have different therapists, we collaborate together to ensure that the organizational and independent skills are looked from a different point of view.
Okay, so moving on to top tips. So we, decided that, we can collate our top tips and share them with you. So the first is develop consistent and realistic routines at home and in the community. So the key words there are, consistency and realistic. So we're not expecting home life to look exactly like it does at school, because that's just not realistic. And we have to understand that home is home and school is school, but where possible, setting realistic routines and expectations for our young people to develop those skills on a consistent, regular basis really does make a difference. Another top tip is to involve the child in planning their day or their week. And this can look like, you can use many tools in order to kind of achieve that goal, but essentially it's about supporting the young person to be involved as much as possible in the tasks that they're doing, or in planning their day. Stop, think and do is almost like a tool or a model that can be used, whereas we're moving away from asking the questions of how and why they need to do something, rather than moving towards stopping and thinking and having them to give the question or give the answer as to what do I want to do and what have I forgotten. So for instance, if you were just about to go into, I don't know, a PE class. It might be that you're taking that 5 minutes before the session starts to stop, think, have I got everything that I need? Have I tied up my shoelaces? Have I got a water bottle with me? Have I done my sensory diet necessary for me to maintain attention in this particular group? Yeah. So stop, thinking, do. Give one direction at a time to avoid overloading. Check that the child or the young adult has fully understood what is expected of them. Use diaries and visual prompts where possible. Again, we're moving away from gestural prompts or verbal prompts, and we're moving more to independence using the visual prompts. And then include the child in setting up for the activity if that's required. So meal times, getting school clothes ready for the next day, etc. Getting them involved in that as much as possible. And then put the end of strapline, practice, practice, practice. As much as it's tempting as the adult to kind of take over, we really do want to provide consistent and realistic opportunities for our young people to develop independence and organisational skills.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. That brings us to the end almost of our today's Lunch and Learn. Thank you for joining us and taking the time to listen to our training. There will be a recording available after that will be emailed to you. Before we move to answering a few questions from the chat, we can refer to our next session.
Yeah, so this is the last Lunch and Learn before the Christmas break. But our next session will be on Friday, the 17th of January at 12:30. And the topic for that session will be school routines and managing change. And if you want to find out more information about how we could help, please do just get in touch with us. There is a QR code on the screen there for you to book a free consultation with us to find out how we can support with any bespoke training that you might have, and to offer outreach in any of your settings. So please go ahead and do that. And it's also another way for us to get some feedback about these Lunch and Learns that we're offering and how we've done today. So encourage you to do that if you have the time.
Perfect. I think we've got about 5 max minutes left. So let's have a look at some of the questions you've put in the chat. So one question, one person says, I've been told that giving my son, age 10 autistic, that giving him visual lists to follow are hindering him from things for himself. However, without lists, knowing what is going to happen, etc., results in meltdown, confusion, self-harm behaviors. I don't know if I'm helping or hindering sometimes.
That is tricky, isn't it? I guess for this example, maybe if we're saying that, let me just say, using visual lists hinders him from doing things. I'm not sure. Well, because we don't know the ins and outs of the case, it's quite difficult. Yeah, the background is difficult. But I would say having visual prompts and visual supports is always aiding or supporting independence, in the sense that, we are moving away from the verbal prompting and less reliant on an adult to carry out those activities. So I think if it's important for your son to have that structure, to know what's coming, it's really important to incorporate that into his routine. It may be that he takes longer to acquire those skills, but actually in the process of getting there, we're going to have a calmer, more receptive young person that's going to absorb that a bit more. So yeah, I would say if that's important for your son, which it sounds like it is, I would say make sure that you incorporate having that visual schedule if that supports him being more calm, relaxed, and then more ready to accept the challenge of the task ahead.
And just to add on that, I know that your son is only 10 years old yet, but we would encourage independence in choosing the activities as well as they progress to older ages. So that gives them the independence of adding the things they want in their timetable and structure their day, which can provide more control of their timetable. So yeah, I would agree that if structure benefits, that's great, and they can work on building their choosing skills and be more independent in the activities they would like to do in their day. Another question is, my daughter is 10, but only 5 to 6 years old emotionally. Would I consider her real age or her emotional age when promoting independence? That's a really good question.
Really good question.
Yes.
What do you think, Steph?
Again, it would be good to have more background information on that, on what does she look like emotionally. But
I would say that it's quite hard to take these two issues as independent issues. I think they work together. So, you know, yes, your daughter might be 10, but actually if she's emotionally dysregulated because you know, for whatever reason we're asking her to do a task, then being 10 doesn't matter necessarily. It's actually we're dealing with how it's presenting at the moment.
Yeah.
So I would say your question is asking which to consider. I would say both, because if you have a 10-year-old that's emotionally dysregulated, you have a 10-year-old that's emotionally dysregulated.
Exactly.
So it's really important that you're factoring both of those things and doing everything that you can to support, you know, positive regulation, etc., to then carry out the task. I wouldn't pay too much attention to one over the other.
To the
to the chronological age. I think you need to think about how it presents in the moment and then what would support progress from that.
Yeah, and build on those milestones as it goes through. I would agree with that.
I hope that's answered your question.
Yep. Last question here is, how do you engage a child if they are not interested in getting involved in the planning of their own week? That can be challenging for sure, and we sometimes experience that in our cohort. So how do you engage them? It can be using motivating activities, like using things that they like, maybe adding one thing on their timetable that you know they're gonna like, but don't add it first on the list, just for them to build some anticipation and some motivation to work towards it, kind of. And then helping them adding other things, starting with the desired ones, I'd say.
And then also I would say that maybe it not looking like a plan is also quite helpful. So if we're just talking about, okay, what should we do today? And they're listing their desired activities, and you'll say, oh, shall we do this before lunch or shall we do this after lunch? So you're already kind of mapping out the structure of the day, but it's less formal, and it doesn't sound like a daunting plan. But actually they have participated in that. So that could be a really interesting way to kind of support that engagement and inspire that motivation.
So it can be very simple as a now next board that we use. So looking at the near future and not the whole day timetable, just to help them make more effective choices to begin with, and then progressing to more complex ones. I don't see any other questions in our chat at the moment, but we're running out of time. If we didn't get to your question now, we will reply through an email. So thank you for joining us again. And
I hope you found that information useful.
Yes.
And please do sign up for the next Lunch and Learn if that's a topic that you're interested in. And if you can scan the QR code for more information about the Lunch and Learns, and some feedback for us and future Lunch and Learns. You can use the QR code.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.